I'm Laura Ingraham. Welcome to Washington for the Ingraham Angle. This week begins with major stories ranging from, of course, PC insanity to possible terrorism. We're digging to get the real story behind the driver who mowed down pedestrians on a crowded street today in Toronto. Plus, despite the left's narrative that migrants don't come here for handouts, we'll tell you about a shocking new report on the number of immigrants now on welfare. Also, black conservatives are speaking their minds, and the PC police are in total freak-out mode. Wait until you hear Tom Arnold's insane rant. And Trump fires back against critics who seem to fear that he might actually make a historic deal with North Korea. But first, Trump versus the GOP again. That's the focus of tonight's angle. When will they learn? More than a year into President Trump's first term, you'd think that all the Republicans would understand that the only way forward is to unify behind his agenda. It's resonating with the people, it's bringing international foes to the negotiating table, and it's having a positive impact on the economy. But some Republicans cannot help but lend aid and comfort to the president's political enemies. So as Trump slowly but surely begins to remake the GOP to be more responsive to working-class Americans, the globalist wing of the party is still in total denial. And the old guard's resistance to Trump, of course, big shocker, is being amplified by a media machine that's been trying to take him down ever since he first came down that golden escalator. Just watch how uncomfortable some of these Republicans are when pressed about whether they'd support the president again in 2020.
Any Republican senator that hasn't been conflicted over this presidency is either comatose or is pretty useless in their blindness.
Are you prepared at this point to endorse the president for re-election in 2020?
I haven't even thought about that election.
You know it's way too early to be talking about the 20. Yes, it is, Chris.
It isn't. Not to say that you support the guy who's president who's the head of your party.
It could be a completely different world by 2020. We have a 2018 election first.
Rather than just rallying behind the president in a show of total unity before the midterms, some in the party end up just giving the media what they want. A storyline about a divided GOP.
The Republican Party of Abraham Lincoln's time is centered in the South. And Trump is a guy from New York, always somewhat alien territory to conservatives.
This reflects a division not only within the Republican Party with the approach to Russia, but within his own administration.
Would you rather have the Republican Party of Paul Ryan or Trump? I mean, that's the question right now.
Well, I don't know what there's no choice. It's the Republican Party of Donald Trump, which is why Paul Ryan's leaving.
But the truth is, if you want to see real disunity, look at the Democrats. They have no real leader. They've moved so far left, they've left America. And they're reduced now to either silly antics or stammering in their attempts to rile up their base.
It's a scam. The tax bill that gives 83% of the benefits to the top 1%. They try to call it a middle-class tax cut, and yet 86 million middle-class families in the life of this bill will be paying more taxes.
We'll bring in an interpreter next time. Well, the Democrats, come on, they're so desperate. They've now sued the Trump campaign, WikiLeaks, and of course the Russians over Hillary Clinton's loss in 2016.
Donald Trump has been saying for a year plus, this is all about sour grapes. It's all because you lost an election. What says that better than the Democratic National Committee suing them and saying, you lost us this election? You see, like David Axelrod saying it seems like a waste of time and resources.
Of course it is. The Democrats can't even agree on a political strategy. Tom Perez and the DNC are filing lawsuits while other prominent liberals are just shaking their heads, fretting over their re-election prospects. Senator Claire McCaskill told the St. Louis Post-Dispatch that the DNC lawsuit is just a silly distraction. And Congresswoman Jackie Speier, hardly a moderate, she said this.
I actually think this lawsuit is ill-conceived, and I'm not very supportive of it.
That is what real disunity looks like. So beyond all the bluster and all the media attacks on the president, Trump's re-election numbers Check them out. They actually look pretty good. They mirror those of Barack Obama and Bill Clinton at about the same point in their presidencies. Today's Gallup reports that among registered voters, 37% believe Trump should be reelected. That's the same percentage that thought Barack Obama should be reelected in 2010, and at 1 point lower than those that supported Bill Clinton in '94. Big deal. Well, last time I checked, both Obama and Clinton were reelected for a second term, right? Here's another leading indicator that the Democratic National Committee might be in some trouble. Well, they took out a $1.7 million loan in February. So their fundraising, a good measure of voter excitement, is pathetic. Meanwhile, the Republican National Committee took in a whopping $39 million in the first quarter alone. Think that might be because of the president? Well, of course, the president has some work to do. He still has to grow the populist movement, take his message to unfriendly territory, and sell it. That means even in states where he didn't win, grow his base. But while the Democrats are in perpetual teardown and resistance mode, I'm telling you, Trump should be perceived as a doer. He is a leader who will always defy and drain the swamp, will not be defeated by it. That's why he was elected in the first place. All the president needs to do is just stay focused on what matters: growing the economy, returning more power to the people, fighting corruption along the way, and refusing to be distracted or deterred by the constant and tedious demonization game of Washington and the seemingly endless, pointless investigations. I know that's easier said than done, but he needs to do that. Now listen to all the naysayers you want, but Trump's reelection prospects and those of his party are on more solid ground than the media or his critics would have you believe. And that's the angle. Joining me now for a reaction in New York is Monica Crowley, a senior fellow at the London Center for Policy Research, along with Juan Williams, co-host of The Five. Great to see both of you. Juan, I want to start with you because you wrote a column recently, just came out, I believe for The Hill, about the GOP disunity, and you cited Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina and Lindsey Graham, who are trying to protect Bob Mueller from any type of firing or other adverse action by the executive branch, by the president specifically. But Tom Tillis has always had a wisdom, in his wisdom tooth, a seed, meaning President Obama. He's not President Trump. He's never liked President Trump. He's terrible on the issue of immigration. He's bad on the trade issue as far as Trump's concerned. So why are we surprised that Tom Tillis and Lindsey Graham, who, you know, they're not populist conservatives, are doing this Mueller deal? That's not surprising to me at all.
Well, it should be. Tom Tillis votes with the president 96% of the time, Laura. And it's not just Tom Tillis and Lindsey Graham. You also have to recall that the chairman of the Judiciary Committee is Chuck Grassley, Iowa, a longtime Trump supporter, and he said he plans to bring this to a vote this week in his committee, no matter what Donald Trump has to say, no matter what the Senate Majority Leader has to say. He thinks this is necessary. And what Tillis said, speaking to other Trump supporters and, you know, evidencing a crack now finally in the kind of uniform stone wall that Republicans have given Trump and made the Republican Party into the party of Trump. Tillis said if Hillary Clinton was in the White House and there was some talk about firing a special prosecutor,
there's no
the
talk
Trump
about
supporters would say it was hypocrisy.
Yeah, but Juan, this is a big fantasy. This is what the liberals have been begging for Donald Trump to fire Bob Mueller. This has been a storyline that the left has been pushing for months and months and months. And Monica, I want you to jump in here because Tom Tillis, who said courage is when you know you're going to do something that's going to anger your base, sitting in his Senate office. The same people who criticized me for filing this bill would be absolutely angry if I wasn't pounding the table if the bill was directed at protecting special counsel looking into Hillary Clinton. I actually am someone who believes that the executive actually has the authority to fire someone in the executive branch. I'm not saying it would be politically wise. I don't think it would be. But the idea that Congress can insulate an executive branch member from firing by the chief executive is frankly unconstitutional. I think Mike Lee is right about this. It's ridiculous. I'm not talking about whether it's politically wise. It's not constitutional in my view.
That's right. We're talking about a separation of powers issue that, frankly, is all of a conversation happening in the media and in Washington, D.C. The same swamp that Donald Trump ran on draining and actually won on draining. If you go into the country, Laura, as you and I do, Juan does as well, the American people are not talking about this. They're not talking about Russia. They're not talking about Bob Mueller. They're not talking about this insane, never-ending investigation. They're talking about the state of the economy. They're talking about the effect of the tax bill. They're talking about jobs, increased wages. They're talking about illegal immigration and the necessity for the Trump wall to be built. They're talking about increased national security, given the fact that this president refuses to appease America's enemies. They're talking about the whole range of issues that directly affect them and their families' lives. They're not talking about these kinds of issues at all. And for the Republicans in the Senate and the House and so on, their real profiles encourage, Laura, right, to be still, at this point, running away from the president who is the leader of their own party. It's insane.
Juan, the poll here, the Gallup poll, shows the following. The president had 86% approval rating among Republicans a year ago, and he has 86% approval rating now. To me, that's pretty good. I mean, I don't know. I guess you could have 96%. That'd be great. But 86% is pretty darn good. And I think most Republicans, they know the juice and the excitement is not with Tom Tillis. I don't know. I mean, no, he wouldn't even get arrested. Nobody knows who he is. The juice and the excitement is with Trump. For all of the tweets and everything, they like the fact that he's fighting for the average person. That's why the Democrats don't know where to go. Bernie Sanders says this. Check it out. He said the business model, if you like, of the Democratic Party for the last 15 years or so has been a failure. People sometimes don't see that because there was a charismatic individual named Barack Obama. But his point is, without Obama, where are the Democrats? Where are they?
I think they're fine. I mean, the thing that you missed there in that calculation is that you have fewer people identifying as Republicans. They become swing voters, independents, and the like with Donald Trump in the White House. Right now, it's the case that Donald Trump is at about 39. I think in the Real Clear Politics average, 41% approval, 54% disapprove. That's a real weight going into the midterms.
That's where he was before the election, wasn't it? That's about the numbers he was before the election.
Well, it hasn't gotten much better, if that's your point.
Before the election.
You mean the 2016 election, Laura?
Yeah. I mean, before the election, he was at about a 39% approval, I think. I mean, overall approval rating of all voters. So I don't know how much that means. I know Rasmussen has about 50% in the daily tracking. So, again, polls are polls.
I would say look at the averages, look at the Real Clear Politics average, and he's clearly way underwater in terms of approval.
But Juan,
the second point
you think Bernie Sanders is wrong? Bernie Sanders is making a point that the working class voters have been left behind by the Democrat Party. He's actually trying to speak to the working class voters, which is why he had these huge crowds.
He's a Democrat, Laura. He's looking to appeal to people and offer a populist appeal that has a lot in line.
But they went with the Clintons. Went with the Clintons, and they still
are doing... You mean the Democratic Party. But I'm talking to you about a populist appeal to the people you are identifying, the working class. Yeah. And by the way, when you ask the American people, should Robert Mueller be allowed to complete his probe, it's like 70%. There's not even an argument, Laura.
Well, I think the president wants him to conclude his probe.
If that's the case, then why don't the Republicans act to say, you know what, it's the will of the people, let this investigation come to a normal end?
It's not the will of the people.
It's not their role. And will of the people. Go ahead, Monica.
This was not the will of the people to have this president endlessly investigated. Yeah. You know, Laura, the president talked on the campaign trail about the forgotten man and woman. Yeah. This is the working class. These are the disaffected Democrats. You know, it wasn't Republicans who elected Donald Trump. It was disaffected Democrats in the 10 key swing states that elected Donald Trump, and he has been delivering for them. He poses an existential threat to the swamp, the media, the establishment on both sides of the aisle, and that's why they have endlessly tried to attack and destroy him. And when the Russia collusion narrative falls apart, as it's already doing, they will try to find something else. This is a president who puts on a suit of armor every day and keeps plowing through delivering for the country.
There's not one election since 2016 where you say, oh, you know what, Republicans have overperformed because of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is actually an albatross at this moment on every Republican from Pennsylvania 18 to Alabama to Virginia governor's race.
Okay, we got to go, guys. We're way over, but thank you. Great segment, but mark the tape. I want that soundbite. I'm going to use that on radio. Remember when the fearmongers on the left warned us that President Trump would isolate us from the world, that would have no friends? Well, instead, what we've witnessed is growing alliances with leaders such as French President Emmanuel Macron. And he's the guest of honor at the president's first state dinner tomorrow night. Let's discuss this and other presidential issues with White House Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley, staying up late. Delighted he's with us in studio. How you doing, Hogan?
I'm great. How are you?
I just want everyone to see that Hogan has an actual journal. I mean, I love that. You have an actual book, not like it's a laptop. You're writing down like a real old school, someone who's preparing. I just love that. I miss journals.
Gotta take notes.
I hope you're taking notes on the angle. Tell me about this Macron relationship. I love it because they were all trashing Trump because he was going to offend the world. Now the world wants to come here and meet him.
They thought the Barack Obama apology tour was the way to go about getting friends and allies, and it turns out it's the exact opposite. We're feared again. We're respected again. He's growing these relationships. I mean, France has been with us forever, as you know. One of the actual first trade deals we ever did, quite frankly, was after we signed the Declaration of Independence. It was with France. But he has only gone to make this bigger and better. They are close friends. They talk all of the time. The relationship couldn't be better.
This is the Huffington Post headline in November, Hogan. You're going to love this. Let's look at it. It only took Trump 1 year to trash America's global reputation. In LA Times, May 8th, 2017, France's election proves it. America is now example of what not to do. But no one ever calls these people on this stuff. We have this ongoing, okay. Is that Max Boot who wrote that? Yeah. Okay, yeah, never Trumper, of course, former Republican, now just a liberal.
Of course. Another self-loathing Republican.
Exactly. Well, they're not Republican. They never really were.
Of course not.
But the so-called experts were wrong before the election. And now here they are again, and they just keep having their gigs on TV, their columns in the New York Times, the Washington Post. But this relationship with Macron, getting back to this, he's an interesting cat for Trump to be a pal with. I mean, he's kind of putting the stop signal up for the move in France to put expedited process on removal, deportation of immigrants in France. He's not on board with that. So he's not a populist like Trump is.
Right.
He's more of the globalist, more of a kind of a moderate globalist in Europe. So how do the two have this personal relationship?
Well,
it's curious.
There are some similarities, and you heard Macron actually make the comment that he used the phrase "make France great again" just the other day on one of the news networks. I think it was actually Fox.
With a flood of migrants from from Germany.
Well, the point is they were both former businessmen.
Yeah.
No one thought they could win this election. They come in and win. They're trying to do things differently. It is interesting because they don't agree, like on the Paris climate deal. They obviously don't agree on the Iran deal. The president's adamantly opposed to that.
He wants TTIP, that European trade deal, too, which Trump doesn't want.
Exactly. So there are some major differences here, but they just have a really good relationship. They're close personal friends. The president said today on the way to Marine One, he said, we're a close personal friend. He's a good friend of mine. So they just have this great relationship.
But Macron wants the president of the United States to stay in Syria longer.
Right.
Until ISIS is crushed. President's instinct and what he campaigned on, Hogan, is that America is not going to stay bogged down in these places where we have no real political solution, a military solution, excuse me. Right. So will that relationship have an effect on the president's ultimate decision to stay in Syria? Everything we know about France's relationship with, sending technology and so forth to Russia and even its relationship with Iran, the Iran deal. That's what folks are worried about here.
Well, yeah, but I also think a lot of people were worried about when Trump took over as president that this town, Washington, D.C., would shape Donald Trump. The exact opposite has happened. Donald Trump has shaped this town. I think these relationships are similar. Everyone says, what's Trump going to do? Is he going to kowtow to foreign leaders? He does not. He's the best negotiator we have. He comes to the table and tells you what he wants. Of course, he wants to bring troops home, but he wants ISIS to be crushed, and he wants to create an environment there to which ISIS cannot ever rear its ugly head again. And remember, the last administration created ISIS. This president wants to end it.
Well, he shouldn't have signed the omnibus. That was his instinct. He was right on that. That omnibus was not Trump's negotiating. That was Paul Ryan, et cetera. Hogan, thank you for being here.
Sure.
And up next, the latest on the driver who killed 10 pedestrians in Toronto today. And then stunning new numbers punch a huge hole in the favorable liberal myth that your tax dollars don't support legions of immigrants. Stay there.